Well, I think that's the starting point. As the Protestant used to say, "Soli Deo Gloria," to God be the glory for everything. So I am proof that God's grace is sufficient and it's working. So my story begins in communist Romania. I was born in 1976, and I grew up for the first 12 years of my life in communist Romania. And again, for those who are not familiar with what communism meant, it typically meant oppression, it meant poverty, somewhat of a persecution. So I remember as a little kid being taken out and ridiculed by my teachers and some of the colleagues for the fact that I was a Christian.
Mm.
Uh, Evangelical Christians were not really outlawed, but kind of looked down upon. They're not allowed to hold, education. They're not allowed to have, real jobs. They were viewed as almost enemies of the state. So I grew up in this environment up until the age of 12. Then at the age of 12, I went to the United States of America. My father emigrated a few years before. And then in 1989, this was before the revolution,
Mm.
we got to the US. And again, in the mind of a little boy, I thought that I was going to go to the promised land. I thought that America was going to be just, heaven on earth. And it was, by comparison to the dark, cold place which Romania was. I remember landing in Chicago, Illinois, and just seeing the lights and seeing the
Mm.
food and seeing everything. I thought it was incredible, and it was good. I really enjoyed it. However, on a personal note, 3 months later, our father left us. Uh,
Uh,
so, so there we were, my mother and my two brothers. We moved to Cleveland where we had an aunt, and we were literally on the streets. I mean, we rented an apartment, and I had started working. So when people ask me how I became an entrepreneur, I became an entrepreneur out of necessity,
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and I realized that I had that skill set. Now, again, at the time, I didn't speak any English, so I learned the most important word in the English language, which is work. I would go
Yeah.
door to door to door and ask people for jobs. And I discovered a very hospitable, very friendly culture. And again, these were not necessarily Christians that would hire me and would have me shovel their snow or cut their grass, clean around the houses. And eventually I ended up working for a butcher shop as a 12-year-old boy in
Mm.
inner city Cleveland. And a few years later, I worked myself up to a point where I actually bought my boss out. So I borrowed $25,000 in my mother's name. I was not legal to sign papers. I was 17 at the time. My mother couldn't speak English, so she just kind of signed the paperwork that I put in front of her. So it was just an interesting partnership between my mother and I. And that's how I became an entrepreneur and started my first company. Since then, I've probably been involved in about 25 to 30 startups. Most of them failed because I've been doing them with students, and because, they were really not designed to be successful. But I got the bug early on. Unfortunately, during this time, I also entered a very rebellious stage in my life against God, against Romania. I didn't want
Mm.
anything to do with
Mm.
the church. I didn't want anything to do with the fact that I was Romanian. I was actually embarrassed by that. But God had mercy. And interestingly, I was saved by watching a TV documentary called The Shame of a Nation. It was an ABC special, Barbara Walter special on a Friday night, and
Boy,
just
that's an unusual testimony.
very unusual. So that it goes to show you how
Uh,
powerful God's grace is.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That He can use national television in America to reach a poor immigrant boy like myself. And here I am watching the plight of these orphan kids in Romania and kind of like what's going on behind it because once the communism fell, all the nasties came out and we realized what was really going on behind the scenes. But watching those kids, it's though I heard God whispering to me, stop feeling sorry for yourself, stop being angry.
Mm.
It could have been much worse. Here you are, you're in the greatest nation on earth. You have the skill set of entrepreneurship. You can do sales. You've learned the language. You're doing very good by comparison.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
and I gave my life to the Lord, and I said, God, whatever you'll have me do,
Beautiful.
including if you want me to go back there. Now, again, I was a young man. I didn't know God was going to take me seriously,
Y-
but I tell my students, I'm like, careful what you promise to
I,
the Lord.
he
He may do it, you know?
Absolutely. You just real quickly, you made a comment, Sebastian, which I think is really important for our audience. So many people that are from, we'll say the West, and I mean that primarily North America, Western Europe, view entrepreneurialism. I want to go back to your comment about how you got into it. We tend to view entrepreneurialism as an excessive created mind, or you're born with a gift, and I think there's some truth to that, of course. But we've tended, because of the affluence of the West, we've tended to ignore the power of necessity.
Sure.
In fact, when we first started working in Kyrgyzstan back in the early 90s, right after the Soviet Union collapsed, my argument was that starvation is a pretty good motivator.
Yep.
And for a father to watch his children unable to eat, or in your case, a son,
Yeah.
seeing his mother, unable to live,
Yep.
that's a pretty good motivator. And I just want to point that out, because I think there's a tendency to think if you don't have the Steve Jobs crazy gene, you're really not an entrepreneur. Well, yeah, you are, because the word itself just means somebody who starts and does things. The French word entrepreneur literally
Yep.
means one who does things.
Yeah. Doer.
So I love that you said that. I just want to, for our audience, I know a lot of people listening to this thinking, well, I don't have that crazy mind. I don't have that crazy gene. Okay, good. You don't have to.
Right.
Do what's in front of you, and if it's starting a business, God may prosper it, and you may fail. It happens. But thank you for sharing that. What a beautiful testimony. I don't know that I've ever heard anybody say they came to Christ watching Barbara Walters. So I think you're the only one you probably others, but you're the first one ever said that.
Right. Yeah. Well, the Spirit of the Lord can work in mysterious ways.
Amen. Yeah.
And what I do want to encourage people is that once you give your life to God, God is going to do wonderful things through you.